What's up, guys? Welcome to Information Operation. I'm Connor Ryan, and we're coming at you from Marquette, Michigan, bringing you your locally sourced ideas, thoughts, and inquiries. Today on the podcast, we feature Megan Keiser. She is a master's in training and development in human performance improvement and is currently a human resource professional at a call center here in Marquette. She is an avid biker, snowboarder, soccer player, and CrossFitter. And so we talked a lot about human performance in the workplace, which was fascinating. So I hope you enjoy. I hope you learn a few things. I know I did. Megan Keiser, what's up?
Hey, not too much. How are you, Connor?
Just excellent today.
Good.
Thank you for being here.
Glad to be
I
here.
really appreciate it. I
Yeah.
really found our conversation last week fascinating,
hmm
and I was excited to start talking about more of what you do with human performance. So I think that's a good place to get started is could you explain a little bit about what human performance in an organizational setting looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I do is is I take a step back and I try and look at an organization from a very holistic perspective, in order to figure out opportunities to improve the functioning of the organization itself, each department, and each individual within the departments, because all of it must be functioning optimally in order to give the most value to our clients or our customers or make the best products, whatever
Sure, whatever the task of the company may be.
exactly. So that's kind of very high level. My official title now is Manager of Human Resources for a company called Superior Contact, and I was previously in a training and development role. So just the human resources side of things is only a couple months old, but
Sure.
I love it.
Yeah. And are you going to stick with that or are you looking to move up again?
I think, well, I'm always up for upward mobility and expansion of, my work life and enrichment of my work life, but for now I think I've got a lot to learn in this new position. So, I'm going to stick in some form of human resources, I think, for a while, a few
Yeah,
years at least.
few years.
Yeah.
Cool. And what sparked your interest? Like what got you started doing that type of work?
Oh, I know exactly when it happened.
It was like a light bulb moment.
It was an absolute light bulb moment. It was back in 2009. So we're 10 years out. This is
Sure.
2009 is when this change happened. And I had previously been focused on hospitality management, tourism, resorts, hotels, the whole nine yards. And that's what I went to school in Northern for. Well, had a couple jobs after I graduated, and one of the second jobs I had was on a cruise ship. And we had a Hawaiian itinerary. It seems like the perfect job. I was like, I can do anything if I'm working in Hawaii.
Sure. Work
Wha-
in paradise,
I'm
right?
working in paradise. It's gonna be beautiful. I'm gonna love it. Who could, how could this get any better? Well, after a couple months, my balloon got burst and I was like, wow, this is not what I want to do. I wasn't feeling challenged. I was frustrated by some of the leadership in place and just the general like kind of culture and mentality
Sure.
that was coming down from the top. And I got frustrated one day and I was looking in our crew library. It was like a take a book, leave a book type of thing. And I saw this very plain looking book, just white cover, nothing fancy, but it stood out to me because on the spine of the book it said Three Signs of a Miserable Job. And at the time
Oh,
I connected with that title. And I grabbed the book and I devoured it. And it was a book by Patrick Lencioni, something like
sure.
that.
Italiano.
Yes, exactly. And he wrote this book, and it was all about taking an organization that had very poor employee morale and how the things you could do to turn it around. give people autonomy in their work.
What's that mean?
It means give them some level of control over
Oh,
what they're doing on a daily basis.
control of progress as well.
Yeah, control progress, like what they're doing, what they're taking on, like allow them to structure, portions of their day and like, you know, put that in their hands. So pretty simple there. Set goals, like help people with numbers. I mean, a lot of salespeople are driven by numbers, but there's a
Right.
lot of other opportunities for numbers to help guide and enhance performance. And then I think it was and it wasn't the term mastery. That's usually what Daniel Pink refers to some of his stuff as, but it was just the ability to be successful in your role and
Proficiency.
be proficiency, yeah.
That's a good
And
word.
so I read this book and it was my first like organizational development type of book, and I was that moment, that was it. That's when I was hooked. That totally changed the trajectory of my life, and I started immediately looking at programs, and as it turned out, Northern had a training development and human performance improvement program. So
You came
I
back.
came back from Hawaii, came back to good old Marquette, Michigan, and
That's a pretty cool
started
story for
again.
any locals who might be listening.
Yeah.
That, someone went and lived in Hawaii and decided, you know what? I'm gonna go back to the Arctic Circle. I'm
Yeah,
gonna live up in Marquette.
totally. And it was really interesting because at the time I was just like, I am impatient. I'm like, let's go, let's do things. And the mentality of the islands can be summed up in one bumper sticker. And at the time, I was just not quite there. But it was like, I saw this bumper sticker and it said, "Slow down, this isn't the mainland,"
Okay.
which was really interesting for me. And I was like, yeah, there are times now when I'm like, I feel like I need to slow down, but I'm really glad like that I came back, came back because the island life was a little too slow for me at that point in time.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then the big city life is like the polar opposite.
Yeah.
Um, can you apply this stuff to people living in like larger cities as well?
The like the slow down
Like the
piece.
fast-paced job market and how people operate to get jobs done or maybe get jobs in larger cities.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think that I mean Marquette is the largest city in the UP, but I think you move to even larger cities
Sure,
and the
Chicago, New York,
speed, I mean,
LA.
yeah, everything is sped up so much quicker. Mostly because I think just there's more competition. Like if I were to move to a different city, there's so many more human performance practitioners.
Sure.
Like I would have to like, whoa, step up the game, start moving
You have
even
to stand
quicker.
out
Yeah,
in a larger
because
crowd.
exactly. So here there's there are human performance technologists, I suppose, but I'm fewer and far between.
Right.
Yeah, but
That's always intriguing to me is the different lifestyle, and I've never thought about it in terms of organizations or industry, but that's where it is the bigger cities. That's where the largest industries lie, and it's just a different mode of operation,
yeah.
definitely compared to what we're used to, or just like rural farm towns or things like that.
There's I was reading something not too long ago, and I don't know what it was or where it was, but they were saying the benefit to being in cities is just the sheer amount of people and ideas and connection
Sure.
and connecting of the dots, as you said before, coming together. So that just ignites this development and this creation of all kinds of people. So there's some benefit to having the ability just to be surrounded by ideas and people, and
Right. There's a downside too,
yeah,
right?
it's too fast.
And I think sometimes you have the lack of connectivity because of so many, just like system overload, sensory overload, all these people um, bombarding you with opinions and ideas, and it makes it almost harder to choose the wholesome path or the righteous. No, I don't want to say righteous, but truth.
Yeah,
Seeking the truth.
because maybe there's more self-serving activity that goes on.
Right.
I'm not sure. but the genuine connection piece, maybe could be lacking.
Yeah. AKA the ego. I
Yeah.
think there's a nice balance of that in Marquette. There's a really good balance of professionalism and driving forces, as well as let's slow down and smell the roses a little bit. I notice a really healthy medium there.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. We do have the opportunities to connect with people. We've got our networking groups.
Yeah.
40 Below Young Professionals is
Yeah.
one, and then we've got, a Toastmasters group where I've learned a lot.
Are you in 40 below?
I am,
Okay.
yeah.
I went to a
Woo,
few
40
meetings.
Below. Yeah.
Shout out.
Yeah, great organization. If you're a young professional, I would highly encourage taking part in that. I joined 3 or 4 years ago because I got involved with the Iron Range Roll, which was one of their events, and
Sure.
then just got more involved. So
Sure.
it's nice. They've got socials. You can connect with people. I have made a number of connections.
Yeah. The networking piece is really, I think, the value to that program.
Yes.
But that's my opinion. Anyway, we were talking about big cities compared to like rural areas. What's fascinating to me is they get the same education. How does that work out?
With what do you mean the same
The
education?
lesson plans. Let's say we're talking about New York. New York's a very diverse place where you have large cities in Manhattan with thousands of kids coming out of school at the same time, graduating classes, almost always over 1,000 people. And then you have rural New York and upstate New York and the Adirondacks that might graduate 4, maybe 5 kids every year. That's a very, very diverse population, but they're getting the same lesson plans for a different job market. So how do you think that affects them as they go into the workplace?
Oh, I think that really has a huge impact. I think when we're getting ready to train people to enter the workforce, I do think that is a lack of reality involved in
Sure.
the current state of education, as far as getting people prepared for the real world types of scenarios that they're going to learn. I keep thinking, and we've talked about this before, but education needing to change. And
Well, everything else is.
yeah, absolutely. And we can, yeah, I listened to something again not too long ago that was saying like the education system was kind of structured, years ago, hundreds of years ago, early 1900s probably. And back at that time, when it comes to human performance improvement, there was this guy named Frederick Taylor who was doing all these time and motion studies. And from a human performance improvement picture, he was doing these time and motion studies to try and figure out, okay, if you have a human and they need to do a job and it's like building a widget over and over and over, like on a factory line, which
Sure.
was the prominent job type in the early 1900s.
Absolutely.
How do we get them to do that? What do they need to do? And basically, in those positions, people needed to just do the same thing over and over and over. There was no critical thinking involved. It was just, you're okay doing the same repetitive
Oh
tasks.
my
You listen to
gosh.
somebody who's telling you what to do and how to do it and when to do it, which made sense for the 1900s and where we were at.
Yeah.
And maybe the education system was kind of built based on the need at the time.
Kind of built on it. You have a teacher in a classroom dictating what the standards are of the classroom and what is to be done. You take a test, you memorize facts, dates, names, things like that. You memorize it, cram it in your brain, take the test, and then it goes away. And you listen for a bell that releases you from the class and allows you to move positions and start work somewhere else. And you sit at a desk and follow directions
Yeah.
for 8 hours a day. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Right? It works out pretty smoothly for how the job market was at that time.
Yeah. But I think now we're coming into a problem at least in some portions of the world and I guess the country where we're still operating under that old education model. So when people get into the workplace, it's not cut and dry anymore.
Right.
The problems are very abstract. They involve, they require critical thinking. They require us to take a step back and look at things from a different angle and all the different systems that could possibly go on. But I think we're moving in that direction with the education
Sure.
system, but still have a ways to go. But
Well,
it's kind of cool.
what's that look like?
What does that look like? I don't know. More, could it look like more collaboration? I mean, from my perspective, so, and I kind of feel like it's moving in this way, but I'm kind of a novice when it comes to educational reform and everything that's going on. But I know from a human performance standpoint, we use, every day when I'm doing training, I think of this andragogy theory. And andragogy is this theory of adult learning. And one thing that's really important for adults, because back in the 1950s, this guy, not Maslow, oh my gosh,
Okay.
Knowles is his last name.
You were upset last time you were trying to think of that. You're
Yeah,
like, oh,
what is his
I
name?
hate when you
Um,
just.
so Knowles, he was, the father of adult learning, and back in the 1950s, he started to posit that adults learn very differently than children, which is in the child side of the learning is pedagogy. And I'm not super familiar with everything that goes on there. But what I feel like I'm seeing is based on the needs of the workforce now and the workforce moving into the future, we need to, I don't know, potentially take some of those adult learning principles and start implementing them within our school systems in our, middle
Especially, yeah,
school, high school.
especially in high school and college.
Yes, in college too. I mean, some of these adult learning principles that I look at, especially when I go into a training scenario at work, is adults, first and foremost, need to know why.
Why am I doing this?
Why am I doing this? And it's so often
And
overlooked.
it's very simple.
It's very simple. I mean, I think there's a mentality of, some managers and leadership or supervisors that it's like you come into work, you do what I tell you, and that's, you don't need a why, you just do what I say.
Well, sometimes you're getting paid.
Yeah.
And
Right, you're getting
you're
paid.
getting
That's the
paid.
why.
That's the
That's
why. And that's like assumed.
yeah.
Assumed that you're getting paid, so you're happy. You're gonna do what I say.
Right. But it's not the case. That's not the way it works now.
What is the case?
If you want to get optimal performance out of your people, you have to tell them the why because it's so important because learning and coaching will stick better for an individual when you tell them the why they have to do something because it starts to make sense and they're like, oh, I get why I have to do that. I get why you're asking me to build widget A this way versus the way I was doing it.
It's going up for a greater good.
Yeah, exactly.
It's helping people.
Yeah,
Bottom line.
yeah. The purpose driven is huge. But the why, and you need to connect that with adults. And I think too, very important for kids, moving into the high school, realm and college realm. Make sure to do that because that's what's going to help learning stick versus the memorizing and forgetting.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
How do you apply that into the real world? It's if you just memorize it and forget it, that's a whole bunch of human energy wasted
Right.
for nothing.
And something kind of just clicked in my brain. Like, this conversation might not, completely reform education, but I'm a high school wrestling coach. So I can go and apply this stuff. Like, why are you here, man?
Yeah.
What are you afraid of?
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
I always do that shit. I love, like, just, like, stand them up against the wall and just, like, ask them tough questions. And they're just like, well, I don't know. And then they think about it, and then they come back, and they're like, you know what? Because I want to, make myself proud. I want to, feel accomplished about something. It's like, nice. All right. And then you make an example out of that.
That's the why, and that's important for you as a coach to know because I want you to remember the whys. Don't leave that as just a singular instance that somebody just tells you their why. I want you to remember that, and I want you to pull that in the future. That's
Sure.
what's driving that person. And if you know that and they know you know that and you're doing what you can to motivate them and remind them of their why, especially
Yeah.
when they're having a rough meet or
Sure. They
match,
lose.
they lose.
Right. It
And
sucks. It's a
yeah,
hard pill to swallow.
yeah. And so you can take that and apply that.
Right.
That's super
Give me
powerful.
another one.
Another one. So another one is adults are generally self-directed.
Okay.
So we all know that, like, when you get to a certain age, you don't need somebody telling you what to do, like when you're in elementary school or
Right.
middle school. You don't need that teacher. You know what needs to get done. So, operating under that idea that adults are self-directed. And I think sometimes when we get into organizations, leaders or supervisors forget that. They think they need to tell their people exactly what to do. I don't think, give them guidelines, give them an outline depending on the scope of the work that they're
And
doing, but
encouragement. Yeah.
an encouragement,
That's great.
and people will run with it. They will surprise you. I think one of my favorite adult learning principles, and this is the one that I like to capitalize a lot on when I'm in a training situation or when I'm coaching somebody at work to improve their performance, is you build on adults' past experience. Huge, absolutely huge, because
So is that strengths and weaknesses,
it's
or is that past experience?
past experience. So any past experience you have as far as
So let's say as a strength and conditioning coach, I have a wrestling background. Build on that.
so you have a wrestling background, strength and conditioning coach. What we can talk about, like, it's kind of what we just talked about with the why.
Right. It's like principles
Okay.
to go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
well, so like we just made a connection to your past experience with the why. When we were talking about the why, you were like, "Oh my gosh, I'm taking this why and I'm applying it to my past experience as a coach, and now it makes sense in your world."
Yeah.
Using people's past experiences to connect to information they need to learn is the quickest way to get them to cement that information into their long-term memory.
Right.
So I think of this when in my current position, not going to talk about the clients specifically, but we work with energy market clients, so electricity, natural gas based. As part of training, in order to start connecting the dots with the people that come in with our new employees, I ask them to bring in copies, of their utility bills and that sort of thing. So we can
Sure.
start to take their past experience
Sure.
with their everyday lives that, is often overlooked as being something
But was very real at that time
it's very real at the time, and connect that to the new learning.
to what
And
you're going to be helping others do.
yes, to what
Okay.
you're going to be helping others do, and that can help accelerate learning. That can help accelerate performance and and reduce time to competency.
Yeah.
All of those things come into play because, from an organizational perspective, if people can go from like zero level of knowledge to knowing everything they need to know and functioning in a shorter amount of time, it's better for everyone.
Sure.
So connecting to past experiences and past learning is probably one of my favorites because when I get to do training, I like to connect. I like to ask the participants questions.
Yeah.
What does this look like in your
Yeah.
life? And you've got those blinding flashes of insights where people are like, "Oh my gosh, I know how the dots are connecting now
I was
because
meant to be here.
I was meant to be here. I get this. This makes sense."
Yeah.
It's yeah, which is kind of
That's
cool.
very cool.
So I think that's one of my most favorite parts of the adult learning principles to play with
Yeah.
in a training setting.
See, I'm just putting it into context, and I seem to do that automatically. Like when I was a strength and conditioning coach, and I have that wrestling experience, I thought as soon as I got the job, I want to help wrestlers. I get them,
Yep.
right? Or I want to help bikers. I get them,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. 100%.
And that's really valuable because you have insight into what their world looks like. Working with clients like, oh, yoga might help you here in your game or whatever performance-based activity that you're into, rock climbing, whatever it may be. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then you design the programs around that theme or whatever skill base that they're doing. That's the cool thing about strength and conditioning as opposed to personal training.
Mm-hmm. Well, in knowing, and
Sport specific.
yeah, and this isn't necessarily an adult learning principle, but one of the things that I also always think of is you have to always keep the end in mind.
Yeah.
So, in order to get to the performance you want, like because you were a wrestler, you're a biker, you're all these things, the desired end goal of what the performance should look like. So,
Right.
having that experience, you can work backwards with the kids you
Sure.
coach and then build up to the end goal, which is really valuable.
Right. For them, it's the state finals.
Yeah.
And for bikers, it's being able to launch off 15-foot cliffs and land it and not blow their knees out.
Not go OTB like,
Right.
oh gosh.
Yeah.
So those are the end goals, but
I went OTB yesterday.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you crushed your bike, hey?
Yeah. Yeah. Hey.
I know,
Yeah,
I've been here too long.
yeah, the rear rotor got bent on your mom.
Gosh,
Yep.
dang.
So no worries.
Well, you can fix that,
Yeah,
right?
it's like $30 or something like that.
Yeah,
Not a big deal.
no worries.
But talking about like past experience and how that affects human performance, personally, what past experience do you have that kind of makes you feel that way in your setting?
Oh my gosh. Immediately, I will tell you, and I didn't know exactly how this all connected
Until just
until
recently.
recently, but I will tell you, going into hospitality management, and originally, like that's where I thought I wanted to go in life in my, late teens, early 20s, because that's the experience that I had. I grew up in a tourist town. Boyne City, Michigan blows up in the summer and the winter.
Yeah.
You've got Boyne Mountain right there, and then you've got
Travers.
Lake Charlevoix, Travers.
Yeah.
I mean, it is just incredible. So tourism was ingrained in me and helping people in customer service. And what I'm realizing is that past experience has proven invaluable in my role as a training facilitator and in my more recent role as a human resources professional, because you learn how to read people, you learn how to build rapport very quickly, you learn how to be supportive, you learn how to look at unstated needs or unanticipated needs of the customer.
Sure.
All of those soft skills are the basic foundation for what I do now. And because when I'm in a training setting, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the unanticipated needs of the learner. What are they needing that they're not telling me about? And I try to figure that out. And maybe it's not because they're not telling me because they want to make my life harder and they don't want to learn, but because they don't know how to verbalize what they need. You
Sure.
don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
Typical statement. So all of my customer service and hospitality background has helped me out in this people field of
Yeah.
training development and human performance improvement.
Are you able to kind of scratch off the surface and get down to what needs to be done?
I think so. I do think that's what I really seem to excel at, I think, is getting down to the root cause
Yeah.
of what people are missing and
Well, that's hard. And like you
all of
said,
that.
sometimes they don't even know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's my past experience and knowing what the end goal is that I
Right,
can
working backwards.
I can kind of figure out where the disconnect is. And then what I will do is once I kind of figure out where the disconnect is, I come at my information sharing from multiple different angles to try and get that connection, that synaptic connection in their brain
To click.
to click. And then you do have that aha moment and you're like, whoa.
Right.
And then the learning sticks because now you're not just memorizing a fact, you're memorizing or you're
You're
Like,
learning something that is going to need to be applied or is already being applied.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and in order to do it consistency with proficiency, you gotta you gotta know it with experience. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just something you read in a book.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, and that has, I mean, to go back to education, like, when do you do that when you're in college? When do you use this stuff? Small groups, we don't do enough small groups. And then what about the communication piece? Like, where do we really learn to communicate? It sounds like you learn to communicate maybe working in a tourist town, maybe
Mm-hmm.
working on a cruise ship, but that was before, like, that was after college. That was before and after college.
Yeah. It was, and I think those, I've never really had, and that's something I think I took for granted up until recently. I've never had a problem communicating with people, whether it's face to face, over the phone, in writing,
Mm-hmm.
all of that, just because I always just did it. But when it comes to the communication soft skill piece, how do you train people to do that? It's just practice.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you
I'm
think that's nature or nurture? Think you're born with that ability, or you think it's like your environment as you grow up?
I think it's
Cause like,
both.
yeah, cause sometimes you meet like babies and they're just like, no, don't touch me, don't look at me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Turn
Yeah.
out to be shy kids.
Yeah. And I think so, and I do think it's both. Um, I think it's just your general preference for how you behave. Like some people have those introverted preferences, and so they're just less likely to communicate. They're
Right.
less likely to talk about their feelings. They don't want to. It's not
Sure.
how they process information.
Sure.
I know from my perspective, I I can communicate, but when I'm taking in new information and when I'm working through problems in my head, I like to do that alone. I do that by myself. I don't want to talk to people, but I have friends when they're working through problems or things that they need to tackle, they're like, I just need to talk about it. I need to verbally talk to somebody about it to clarify where I'm at. Whereas myself, I don't communicate until I know exactly what I'm trying to say.
How do you learn what kind of person you are? This is like a kind of a funny
It's a
question.
lot of it's a lot of introspection. So it's it's thinking about it. It's that self-awareness. Like that's what I've been working on a lot over the last like 5 years
Sure.
is knowing thyself. Because when you figure that out for yourself, then you're more able to function. But a lot of it is I've taken a lot of assessments like the emotional intelligence
Right.
assessments and the personality assessments and strengths finder 2.0 and all of these things that have given me a much better idea of where my strengths are or how I operate or what I might need to do to enhance my performance. But from a like going back to the communication piece,
Yeah.
nature and nurture, I think it's both because I'm also part of our local Toastmasters chapter, and Toastmasters is this international organization that helps you,
Whoa. Like give a toast?
yeah, and communicate and
Wow.
enhance your leadership, yeah. And great chapter. Go Superior Land, woo!
But
But
give speeches and stuff like that?
yeah, public speaking, eloquent, articulate speeches, and communication. Yeah, it's
There's
huge.
an art to that.
There's an absolute art to that, and we have a group of people that get together and practice and hone and work on that every month. So we do that, and what's really interesting about that is depending on your environment, some people grow up with the impression that they shouldn't speak or that you should
Yeah.
be quiet. How many times as a kid did you grow up and somebody was like, your parents were like, sit down and shut up back there,
Right. Like
in
the
the back
adults are
seat of the
talking.
car.
The adults are talking.
The adults are talking, you need to be quiet. That happened. I remember growing up kind of like that.
Well, that's kind of old school.
It's a little old school. I always feel like when we sat at the dinner table, we had family dinner every night, and
Yeah.
my parents were on either end of the table, and they were talking about things like, I don't know, real estate, what happened at work, all of these things, and my brother and I were just kind of like, sitting there just kind of quietly talking,
Sure.
waiting to interject until we were, asked a
Asked.
question. Yeah.
Wait
Which
until you're asked.
yeah, but that was just like dinner time. It's not like we were
Sure.
totally suppressed with our
Right,
communication
right, right.
at any other times. I'm sure we did our fair
Oh,
amount bit of communicating, but
of course.
just that type of idea. So I do think when it comes to communication and comfort level with that, it's
Yeah.
both nature and nurture.
Now, do you see a shift going on? Like
Um,
like now kids at the dinner table, they have more power than the parents?
yeah, and I don't necessarily think that's the right way to do it.
Well, where's that coming from?
Oh, I don't know. I
I mean, we work with kids
yeah,
with Start the Cycle and 906 and it's
yeah,
different.
it is
They're
different.
different than I was anyway.
Yeah,
I'm speaking for myself, you know.
yeah, for sure. Like, and I'm not, I don't know what parenting is like these days. I'm not in that club right now. Um, but I don't know if it's swung too far the other direction, and I don't want to make generalizations because I do see kids
Well, there's some great
on
kids out
on
there.
both ends.
Absolutely.
So mm, I don't know. Yeah, I don't
That's all
know.
right too.
Yeah.
I just notice, I mean, there's things that have definitely changed the culture of young people. I think, the phones is one thing, and that's a given, and a lot of
Mhm.
people talk about that. But I think what's more interesting is what's on the phone and what
Mhm.
they're really getting into when they're on the phone, the social media platforms, and then the seclusion from communication with the games and things like that.
Yeah. There's the phones I'm torn about. It is interesting because not too long ago again, I do a lot of like random listening to things and watching stuff, but I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek.
Hmm.
And he's just in general, he studies leadership, he studies human performance. He's also a big fan about, finding the why. He's got a book out there called Finding the Why.
Yeah,
Any leader, I mean, should definitely read that book. It's a good one. But Simon Sinek, I just watched a quick YouTube video on his stuff, and he was talking about communication and the phones and how it's seriously negatively impacting
sure.
the youth of today. And
Well, yeah,
how's that going to change our workplace? I mean, I think about that a lot. It's really interesting to observe my break room.
mm,
I do a lot of observation just to kind of see what's going on. And it's not like
mm,
this every day, but
but it's sad.
yeah, we work in a contact center. Like that's what I do now is contact center, a call center essentially. So we've got a whole team of people acting as a customer care department.
Yeah,
And so their job is to come in and communicate all day.
right.
You communicate, you answer questions, you talk eloquently, like you offer empathy, you do all these things. And so you get into our break room, and when people are on their lunches, they're not interesting and not necessarily interested in talking
They're
to their
isolating.
coworker. They're isolating, they're sitting there on their phones,
Yeah.
which, everybody can do what they want, but it's interesting just to look at that. And it's not always like that. I mean, some days it's definitely more boisterous and noisy in the break room, but
Sure.
there are days when I go in there and there's maybe 5 people and it's just
Dead silent. That's kind of
silent.
interesting.
Yeah.
Even more so, like, disturbing is when it's at the dinner table at a restaurant,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
right?
Yeah.
Or maybe outside, like a beautiful place, like
Yeah.
maybe on top of Sugarloaf or Hogback or on a trail. There's
Yeah.
like a family walking and they're all in their own space on their phone. It's just really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and it might not be good or bad, but it's definitely different.
It is. There's what Simon talked about too as part of that is when you're with a group of people, like if I were to pull my phone out right now
Yeah.
and start looking like we're
Don't
having
do
our
that.
conversation,
Don't do that.
I won't do that, I
Okay.
promise. But what would that do to you? What would you start thinking immediately? Like I'm here for this podcast and I'm
Right.
like,
It's a psychological thing from my perspective.
yeah.
Like, oh, she doesn't care.
Yeah.
Yeah. It kind
And
of kind of makes for disingenuine conversation.
yeah, exactly. And what do you think that's doing to everybody who's on the receiving end of that? Like, if I were to pull my phone out and you're sitting here and you're like, oh, she's disconnected, like nothing's happening, you, I think, unconsciously would start to be like, oh man, I'm not, I'm
Yeah,
not good enough. That this negative self-talk would creep in, which leads to so many other things that we're experiencing today, right? The depression, sadness, loneliness, all these things,
sure.
like just simply because of that dang phone and the improper
Right.
use. Like I think it's a huge benefit. Like I think we can accomplish so much with it, but it's really important to be aware of how we're using it. It, just
As a tool or a distraction.
yeah,
And I have a ton of things like flowing through my head right now, and three right now that are in the forefront is
yeah.
like using technology, utilizing technology in school,
Mm-hmm.
and why that's not really implemented
Mm-hmm.
at all. Like we don't teach our kids how to um, use technology effectively as a tool,
Mm-hmm.
which is a huge part of the workplace nowadays.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Second is it takes away from reading. And do you know anything about how reading is valuable for people?
I
Because you keep
mean,
mentioning books.
I
It's
know.
like,
I do. Well, mostly because for me, and everybody learns differently, like that is one of the primary means I feel like that I gain my information
yeah,
is the reading by myself, the internal analysis and assimilation of that information into my being, like,
mm-hmm.
and then I will think about it,
Because you
I'll sit
relate
on
to
it,
it.
I relate to it, and then I can go and talk about it. But that's just my
Right.
personal preference when it comes to that.
Do you take
So
notes?
well, here's my other thing. I know this about myself. I have to take notes
Mm-hmm.
if I'm having a conversation, like if I'm having a conversation with a group of people and in a meeting, I have notes. Mostly because I know that I will not remember the details.
Right.
Like I have got to write stuff down. Otherwise it floats away because for me, I am more, I feel like, of that holistic type of thinker. Like I like the big picture type of stuff. So, but I know I can't operate like that all the time. It's just
Sure.
unrealistic. So I need to build systems, and one of my systems is taking notes that I can look back on. But
Right.
definitely a note taker, and that does help. Not necessarily. It's just it's like a security blanket. Like if I write it down, hopefully I'll remember it. But I know that if I do forget it, it's there.
Right.
I've got it.
Yeah. And reading helps you sleep too.
Yeah.
Do you know that?
Yeah, because at night, if I'm like trying to go to bed, I just start reading, and 2 pages later, I'm like conked out.
Exactly. But look at your phone. It'll actually make you stay up longer. And it
Yeah.
does something weird with your eyes. I don't know like the science behind it, but
Something about the light.
yeah,
I don't know.
it really fucks with your eyes
It does.
in a big way.
Yeah. I think there's an app for that, though.
Oh, good,
To fix
good.
that.
We're saved. We're
We're
saved.
saved.
There's an app for that. Um, and then the final thing that kind of came across my mind, which was kind of a little more random, is like there's a lot of assurity in the organizational um, environment, and you're kind of telling me that people need to see where all this is going and have a good understanding, a firm understanding. But why do people fear the unknown? Like um, the unknown of where the company is heading. Why do people need that understanding? Why can't they have faith?
Do you have faith in everybody who tells you that you should do something just because they've got a plan?
Mm.
Hey, jump off this building. Trust me,
Well,
I've got a plan.
I have faith. I have faith in my path. That it's a journey. I have faith in myself, and wherever my path leads me. Um, so the unknown is everything,
Yeah.
and I embrace it.
Yeah, I think a general best practice, and it's something that can be overlooked, is the goals, vision, mission, values, all of those things of organizations. So those are the whys, those are the driving high level factors. And I think
Hmm.
Most companies get that. A lot of companies have the vision, mission, values set in place, but maybe it's something you hear about on day one in orientation, and then that's it.
Right. It's not a constant driver.
It's not a constant driver. Where in order for those things to be really powerful and effective, they need to be spoken about like every day. Your employees need to see that you're using that vision, mission, and values to make decisions, especially when you get into those tough decisions. So, core values of my current workplace are quality, integrity, customer experience, and teamwork. So you use those core values, and I think employees need to feel secure in the fact that if we ever got into a situation where we had to choose between two options, route A and route B, we would choose the route that most closely aligns with those values.
It's like a democracy.
Yeah, I mean, and it's kind of, but it's like they're the guiding principles because you can have, like, organizations have handbooks, right?
Sure.
You have handbooks, and the handbooks outlines different things that will happen. This is how we deal with paid time off. This is how we deal with sick time. This is how we deal with travel, or, social media policies and all of these things. Well, you can't put every single scenario into a handbook.
Sure.
So the guiding values, mission, vision, all of those things help people make decisions in an organization that will keep the organization functioning the way it's supposed to,
In
even when,
alignment, yeah.
in alignment, even when there's no step A, step B, step C
Sure.
for
Even though it might
the
not look
scenario.
out for their best interest as individuals.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
What's the difference between employees and entrepreneurs?
Oh, employees and entrepreneurs. I mean, I think entrepreneurs are those that are just go get them. Like, they're gonna start something. They're gonna build their own path or cut their own path. And I do think that there can be overlap.
Sure.
I mean, I feel like I'm currently an employee, but a piece of what I do could be viewed as entrepreneurial because I'm cutting paths.
Yeah, taking the road less traveled.
Yeah, and we're experimenting. We're doing things when it comes to our culture. So diving into the unknown.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I mean, have you ever had to do that in your life?
diving into the unknown.
Yeah, let's step outside work.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Well, diving into the unknown would be the the most unknown and unprepared I may have been was going to Spain and spending a summer over in Europe.
Tell me
I
about
think
that.
diving into the unknown, that was a really interesting, fun time in life. Have you heard of a quarter life crisis?
I think you just made it up.
No, it's a thing.
Okay.
Like, you have people, they get into their 40s and they have these midlife crises.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure I went through a couple quarter life crises in my mid 20s.
Yeah, like 25 or so.
Yeah, 25 or so. And it's just that time period where you're grappling with what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah.
Like, this is not the way that I thought things were going to end up in life. This is not my path. Like,
Yeah.
everything is deviating. Like, it just things felt like they were falling apart, and
Were they?
no.
No.
No, they weren't
It's like,
really.
that's what expectations do.
Yeah, and it was
Folks.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
So I went through a period where grappling with the expectations I set and where I thought I was going to be, and just things not working out the way they were supposed to. One of the expectations, and I'm so far beyond it. I remember being like 14 and going to my cousin's wedding, and I remember she was 23, I don't know why I remember that, but I was always like, when I was 14, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be married when I'm 23 and all these things. Just these expectations that blow by, and you're just like, what happened?
Of course.
So you go through that period of resetting everything. And my good friend Aurora Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
She's been my friend since we were in preschool. I mean, it's pretty cool that we still get to live in the same town and work and hang out. But
She's good people.
yeah, awesome. I know. I love Rorsky. So she introduced me to this movie called The Way. It was a Netflix movie. Emilio Estevez and his dad put this movie together only because they had walked the way, the Camino de Santiago. And it's this pilgrimage route that goes from the Pyrenees over in France. Like you kind of start in France, you walk over the Pyrenees, and then you follow this 800-kilometer trail across northern Spain. And I watched the movie and I said, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
What? Like, who does that? I don't know. I did it. I was like, we're gonna make it happen. At the time, during this time period, I was teaching at Northern, so as luck would have it, I got my summers off.
Yeah.
So
Perfect.
it kind of made a lot of sense. And at that time too, I was also graduating in May, May or yeah, early May 2013, and with my master's. So I was like, got my summer off, I'm done, graduating, like celebrating, like I just need some time. Because that was another like time in my life where I was so stretched thin, just trying to finish up projects.
Sure. From the masters, probably working during it,
Oh yeah, I mean, I
doing
was working full time at North. I was
right,
instructing. I was teaching all these classes, like
grading,
responsible for the
yada yada.
education of the youths and the grading and the
Yeah.
lesson plan development. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So school ended, and I was just gonna do this Camino by myself. And I was like, whatever, I'm going. My mother was absolutely terrified of
Mm-hmm.
her daughter going to a foreign land, like going to a foreign land by herself. And so my brother got on board, and he ended up,
Nice.
quitting his job and went on this adventure. So it was just the two of us. And it was a grand adventure, and that really was jumping into the unknown. We did a little bit of planning, but we only bought one-way tickets. We're like, hey, we're not
Yeah.
going to put a timestamp on, we're not
Yeah.
going to, we don't know where we're going to end up. Like, we were
Sure.
both kind of free, for the time
Yes.
being. And so we flew into Paris, France, and it was fun. Like, the first day we flew, I think we flew out of Travers, went to Detroit, and then ended up in Paris. And,
You flew from Detroit to France?
or where were we? Were we in
Flint.
Chicago?
Oh, you went O'Hare.
Maybe, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
Okay.
that was it. I think that was
Otherwise,
it.
you'd have to do Bristol and Flint.
Yeah, no, no, yeah.
Okay.
So I think it was O'Hare. Flew into Paris, and I think I mean, as soon as we landed, it hit us because my brother and I we don't know French
Right.
or Spanish for that matter. I learned a few phrases when I was there, but
What'd you do?
well, we just figured it out.
That's how it goes, right?
Yeah, it was really interesting just, going over there, landing, and being like, wow, we're really into the unknown. But we kind of worked it out. I mean, would I have been more prepared? Yes, but according to, like, I would love to learn a language, and I think it's so valuable, and I think moving forward, it's really important for us to think about that from a global perspective, is knowing Spanish, knowing French,
Right.
knowing something, some
Connecting
kind of
with one
language.
another.
Yeah, absolutely, but that was just not part of my world at the time, and I am not linguistically inclined so much when it comes to learning other languages. So, anyway, struggled there, but that was really jumping into the unknown. We didn't really know what to expect. We just had everything we needed on our backs, a couple pair of underwear, a couple pair of socks,
Yeah.
like a long sleeve shirt, a short sleeve shirt.
Yeah.
And the thing, I wanted this to be a journey of introspection. Like, I was just done. I was fried. My brain was fried. I wanted to take that time, this walk, this 500-mile walk, to just be in my own head.
Yeah.
Again, my expectations were kind of shattered because within a few days on the Camino, we met up with well, they were shattered, but it was for the good
For the
thing,
greater
for
good,
the
yeah.
greater good. We ended up catching up with a couple Canadians, our German friend, our friend Valentine from Hungary, and Eunice from Hong Kong. And what we ended up finding out was we all started the Camino on the same day, but we never saw each other kind of on that first day. We Well, maybe we did. We just kind of bunny hopped over each other for a few
Yeah.
days and then finally ended up at the same hostel and just kind of connected for the rest of the journey.
Wow.
So it was really cool. So I didn't get all the me time that I thought I wanted or needed, but
You
I
found
think
a community with
I,
the same intentions
yeah,
almost.
yeah, it was really, really cool. And all of us were about the same age,
Yeah.
there for different reasons. It, yeah, it was just a lesson in human connection. And that time period, that was really interesting for me because I didn't take a phone. That for 3 months that we
That
were
was
over
your
there,
communication.
that was the communication, but I
It was
wanted,
direct.
yeah, I wanted to deconnect or, extract myself from all of that because I was like, what am I going to need a phone for? I can't use it anyways. Well, as it turns out, I kind of later wish I had it because you can connect to Wi-Fi everywhere. But I think it was really important that I didn't have it. And we'd go places, we'd go to a coffee shop and you pay and you get some Wi-Fi and chat my mom and tell her we're still alive because she was freaking out.
Sure.
But yeah, it was a good time to just step back and get with myself. I got a lot of flack from everybody because we were so concerned about weight of your pack because you're walking 500 some miles and
Every ounce counts.
every ounce counts. And I thought I was being really smart because I took my toothbrush. I took like a full size toothbrush and
Filed
I
it.
was like, yeah, I was like, I'm going to save weight. I'm
Yeah.
going to cut this toothbrush in
Probably
half,
a pain
right?
in the ass.
And it worked out. It was fine. So I used this like half-size toothbrush for a while, but then one night we were all sitting around sitting around the table and it was brought like and every night we were in Europe, oh my God, you could get a bottle of wine. Like it's the cheap wine for like $2.
Yeah.
So we all just got a bunch of wine and we're sitting around talking and I pull out my toothbrush and my brother was like, "What is this, Megan?" And he points out the fact he's like, "You brought 5 books with you." Like I brought 5 huge books with me because this was again my time for introspection and I was like, you
Uh,
see kind of the
the thought
the
process.
irony
Yeah.
and yeah, the thought process of, well, I'm cutting weight on this toothbrush that I cut in half, but I have these 5 books that I have to take with me. But everybody was grateful for those books because they were some of the only books we could actually find in English. So everybody in our group, our German friends, our Canadian friends, everybody read those and it kind of cycled through. So
That's
I didn't
awesome.
have to carry them the whole time. Like once
Yeah.
I passed it off, somebody else could carry it for a while. But that was just kind of a fun time. But diving into the unknown and the only part of that trip we really had planned was the first month or so
Hmm.
when we walked across Spain, and that was pretty well laid out. Every day we just stopped in a new village and stayed at an albergue, which is what they
It's like a hostel.
it's like a hostel, and it's super cheap, anywhere 5-10 euros a
Sure.
night, and totally worth it to get a shower and
Big time.
potentially the ability to make some spaghetti and whatever, hang out.
Kind of
But
shows you what's important.
it
A
does.
toilet.
I know. Oh
Wow.
my
That's great.
goodness. Yeah. Invaluable. Like you really learn to appreciate the simple things in life. And I think that time period really really brought into focus something as simple as your feet and your shoes. And I can't tell you in the first couple weeks when your body is not acclimated to walking 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day and the blisters and the calluses that form, it's all part of the process, but you learn to value your feet so much and your knees.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I was carrying too much weight all the books and the unnecessary camping gear that we didn't even use. We ended up shipping it forward. That you really take for granted. So taking care of your feet. And my brother, later in the trip, he was not taking care of his oh so important feet and ended up stepping on something and got staph infection in his foot,
No,
which then
that's ruthless.
it's awful. It was awful. And so the last day of, towards the end of this month long journey, we walked like 25 miles because we're like, we're just going to push through. We're going to get to the cathedral, and that was the end goal, and the Cathedral of St. James.
Wow.
And he walked this journey in like women's sandals because he didn't have the proper footwear. He couldn't put his shoes on,
Oh my God.
because he was walking around barefoot because it's something we take for granted.
Sure.
But when that's your primary mode of transportation, you start to think about making different choices in life,
Sure.
like wearing shoes or just being aware of where you step.
Yeah,
Which
because
is,
I mean, 1,000 years ago, he would have died.
yeah, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he would have been dead because he didn't take care of his feet.
Yeah.
There's
So,
definitely a disconnect between that style of thinking and what time is it.
oh yeah, for sure. And I think I think about that a lot because I never want to take for granted the simple things, the
Yeah,
basic necessities like that.
balance and everything, right?
Yeah.
Finding balance. Why are people afraid to do stuff like that?
I don't know. Because it is scary. Because you don't know. It's the unknown. It's change. It's people just not wanting to take the risk. Risk is scary. But I think most times, even if you do take a risk and it doesn't pan out the way you thought it would, if you do the work and you look back and you kind of analyze, well, why didn't it work out? Was it bad that it didn't work out? What else did I learn from that experience?
Would
And
you ever
you
deny
grow.
yourself that opportunity to learn the things that you did?
No. I mean, I'm so thankful for that time.
So is it people don't know that they're going to learn from these things, or is it that they are afraid, or they're not strong enough to learn the lessons the hard way?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things and motivation. Um, from my perspective,
Yeah,
so
it's
what's
almost like is it a lack of understanding, or is it or like ignorance, right? Lack of understanding, ignorance, oblivious, or is it fear or weakness?
well, I think it's a lot of it. I think it's how you prefer. Like some people want to just be in a space and they want to have the house. They want that comfort. They want that settled
A
down
dog and
location, the
a
dog, the
hot
family,
wife,
the
fast car.
yeah, all that. That's what they want. At for me, picking up and going was never an issue. Like I've always done that. Like for me, this is what's really weird. It's the opposite of what most people. So like picking up and going into the unknown of a different country. Yeah, 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 whatever. I picked up and went to Hawaii. I picked up and went to Colorado and
Sure.
went to North Carolina, all these places.
Great places, by the way.
Yeah.
Good
So
picks.
I know, right? Yeah. And they were great. But there's always, side note, always something I missed about Marquette. Like all of those places, they were lacking something that Marquette had that I wished I could get to. So that's I keep coming back. But the leaving in the unknown was something I was always drawn to. Where my fear comes in is from the settling down, from the committing to one thing. And I just purchased a house like a year and a half ago.
That kind of stuff is scary for you.
That was scary because I
Right.
was like, all these thoughts in my head were like, oh my gosh, I'm committing. I'm gonna have to be here forever. Like, what's going on?
I'm
Like, can
gonna
I
die
do
in
this?
this
Like, I'm gonna
house.
die in this house. Like, all of these things. So it's just people being different
Sure.
and I can't fault people for not wanting to just go and explore and have these crazy experiences
Right.
because you flip that around and they're doing something that I'm incredibly fearful of, which is why, like, the house purchase for me, so scary, but that for me was a growth
Yeah.
opportunity,
Yeah.
and I really like it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so I know I can do both.
so is that about finding balance or taking advantage of strengths and weaknesses?
Ooh, oh, that I keep saying both to a lot of things, but I think I don't think many things operate within definite
Yeah, I think it's
silos.
synergetic,
It is
the
absolutely.
situational, nature and nurture, both, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
in delving into, I guess when I started to reframe the house purchase as to being, it was an adventure. I needed to change my mindset. It wasn't like, oh my gosh,
Right.
I'm becoming stuck here.
It is
It
what you
is
make it.
it is what I make it. And when I started to say, this is an adventure, this is a great thing. Like
It's a new endeavor.
it's a new endeavor. I started to change my thinking about it, and it actually has been fabulous because it's almost like I am traveling. So when I was traveling across Spain and over in Europe, I was taking my physical person and moving it to a different city and location to have new experiences and meet new people. Well, when I made that flip and I decided, okay, if I'm going to continue to develop as a human being,
Yeah.
I need to start making commitments to people, places, professions, like all of that. That's kind of when I started to
Right.
say I need to make human performance and training and development and human development my thing.
Your adventure.
That's my adventure. That's my lifelong
That's the
adventure.
breaking new ground.
That's the breaking new ground. And I will continue to, instead of having the breadth of experience, have more deep experience in one field of study. So went through that whole process. But and I hope people can go through that as well and take a deep look at where where they're comfortable and stepping outside that comfort zone. But what I found with my house purchase is every single week and weekend is like a new adventure for me because while I'm not physically moving, I have people cycling through my house because I Airbnb. And so every week I am meeting people from all over the Midwest, all over the country. And I've had people from Sweden stay with me. I've had people
Sure.
from India stay with me. So my life is still being enriched even though I'm kind of in one spot.
Yeah.
It's just figuring out how to get creative enough to make that happen.
Yeah. And you're
So
inquisitive.
yeah, absolutely. That's one thing that I continue to do well. So
So thanks for describing human performance to me, Megan. That was
yeah,
a great description.
yeah. So all of that human performance, and it ties in so well. Like we didn't even touch on all the theories I wanted.
Well, the theories, the
There's
papers. We had a great conversation, and
there's
we're in an hour, 10 minutes. So
it's an hour 10 minutes already.
I know, pretty awesome.
So there we go. Maybe we'll have
But
to do a round two, and then we
yeah,
can talk about the theories because that's the important part.
right.
And well, maybe
That
not
was
all of
all
it,
very important.
but
So as it should be. That was very inspiring, and
yeah,
I appreciate your time today.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
No worries. Until
So.
next time, guys. Ride the waves, dude.